The following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
Morning, Rich Moskowitz. Another edition.
Good morning.
Yeah, another edition of Canna Chat in the Zone. I'm Ralph Tyko, as you well know, and I want to thank you for coming back time and time again to give us updates on what has been a very uneasy transition to legality in California. Rich, what's new in your world of activism and change?
Well, good morning, Ralph. For sure, we're all living in this transition time between what was and what is becoming. And it has been filled with setbacks for everyone in this community. So certainly obvious for businesses, as we've seen maybe, I believe 1% of the farmers have actually been licensed, and strangely enough, almost no licenses in the Emerald Triangle. Almost all the licenses have been in Santa Barbara County and Monterey County, and specifically around Salinas. So that's been a problem. Certainly pricing for the individual has been a problem, and access has been a problem. So what's been happening in my world in particular...
And other than that, Mrs. Lincoln, how was the play?
Yeah, but what's been happening in my world in particular is we are still moving forward, and we are still looking to submit a ballot measure to the city.
Now, this is the city of Alameda, and in the East Bay, Northern California. We are pretty much a prototype for what's going on. We want to build the cannabis industry in Alameda so we can be an example for cities.
Right, but let me interrupt you. Ralph, because I actually think differently. Unfortunately, we are providing a negative example, not a positive example for cities. So we have passed a medical law, and that was a win for Alameda. But as far as ranking our law, even against other medical laws, it is not a good example. And as far as, recreation, well, there's zero. So it's a horrible example. And that's what
I meant to say, we're trying to build this city get it to the point where we can be an example. It hasn't been, as you so eloquently state. What, if you had a name, what's the biggest hurdle? Why wouldn't, we have the room out on the base. We have it all. We have basically a plurality of voters, 68%, who said they wanted legalized cannabis, and we have the powers that be are going against all that when tax money for other things, crumbling schools and what have you, is desperately needed, like in every other city. And that the whole idea was to bring bucks in, not to encourage the black market industry, because that does...
So to answer your question, the single biggest problem, to answer your direct question, is, in my opinion, is that 4 elected city council members do not represent the citizenry on this issue. Luckily, 2 of them are up in the November election for revoting. 1 voted for cannabis, 1 voted against it. However, all 4 refused to even listen to a debate about the advantages of recreational marijuana in Alameda. So that's my answer. The 4 council members are the number one problem, and this is why we are forced to go to the ballot.
Okay, now what does it entail going to the ballot, and how much time do we have to get it on the ballot?
So the process, as I understand it, is fairly straightforward, which includes a lot of time for the government entities to do their part. But basically, in a nutshell, it's this. You write a notice of intent to collect signatures to put a measure on the ballot. You submit that to the city. They then do what's a process known as titling to put the ballot question up, and then you get to collect signatures. To answer the specific question, once you have done that first process, and the city can give you authorization to go out and collect signatures, on the back end, assuming you collected all the signatures necessary to submit the application, in our case, that is a bare minimum of 6,000 and such, but you always pad those, so 8,000. In that case, you have to finish all your signature gathering and submit everything by the first week of July, in this case, working backwards from the election date. So if we can get the NOI into the city this week, and that would mean that roughly it's the 20th today. If all went well in the beginning of April, the first week of April roughly, we would be able to start collecting signatures, and that would give us April, May, and June. So basically 3 months to get all those signatures needed.
Okay. Do we collectively need a just one council person to change their minds? Say Ms.
No.
Ashcraft, for instance, was not reelected, and
no, right. So the council passed the law. It is now the law, and in order for anything to be added to that law, it would have to come from a referral would come from a council member, and then it would be discussed. But the same problem, by replacing one, the same problem exists. The only pro-cannabis person of our 5-member board is the mayor. Other than that, 2 speak pro-cannabis but restricted to medical only, and 2 speak anti-cannabis. So in order to move a referral process forward, and direct the city staff to start writing an addition to the regulation, you would need at least 3 council people, 3 council people. And such. So we don't have that. We only have 1 advocate at this time.
Okay. How about the courts themselves? If one could go to the courts and say simply that this council is not fulfilling what the constituents want, they are not representing our wants and needs. Does stuff get... That's
called the election process. The courts can't be involved in this. There's nothing that they've done that is incorrect. The election process is where the people get to speak if they didn't like the actions of the elected official.
Okay. Then do we have any pro-cannabis candidates running for city council or considering running for... For instance, who's going to run against these... I think it's Odeby, am I correct? Who's up for re-election?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's really a great question, Ralph. So the 2 that are up for election are Frank Matarisi and Jim Odie.
So Ashcraft isn't even up for election.
No,
okay.
But also the mayor is up for re-election. So what I think you might be thinking of is certainly Marilyn Ashcraft, people believe, will be running for mayor. It looks like Frank Matarisi has been talking about that he'll be running for mayor. So that basically what that means is the mayor's seat is up. That's obvious. Jim Odie's seat is up, and he will most likely run for his seat again. And then Frank Matarese, if he declares that he's running for mayor, you have to declare what you're running for. He doesn't get to default to both. So that would mean that there would be either way. There's 2 open seats and a mayor. So the first part of your question was brilliant. What we have not seen yet are the people challenging for council as opposed to mayor. And so therefore we do not know. However, in Alameda politics, council member challengers traditionally come through the school board or other powerful groups like planning and other, experience in the city. because cannabis has always been a don't ask, don't tell, so to speak, for the last 20 years, because you're asking about somebody's medical situation. We don't know. People have traditionally kept this a very private part of their lives, so we don't know their public standing unless they've expressed it, as in the case of the mayor, who expressed her, recovery of cancer publicly. So we're all aware of her personal medical.
Excuse me, has Mayor Trish decided to run again? Has she announced?
I think those are two different things, to be honest with you, Frank. Sorry to be honest with you, Ralph.
Well, frankly speaking, I could be Ralph or Frank. That's the most ridiculous thing I ever heard.
Frank, I love the Groucho.
Or Groucho. I could be any one of those three.
There's no question in my mind that Trish will be running for mayor again. I have no question of that, and I welcome that, honestly, especially even the way she's communicated in the last 36 hours about the tunnel closing. However, there is some sort of process where you actually have a deadline to declare that you want to run, whether it's her or anyone else on the period. So I don't know what that deadline is, and yet I am 100% clear that she is running to be her mayor again, thank God.
Good, thank God, because I think in the long term she's going to go on to higher offices within the state, and then who knows what. She is really super. She is about the only politician in my long lifetime who I can follow and trust without impunity. Even Bernie Sanders on a national level has, my man, all the way, has disappointed over gun control and what have you. But Trish is terrific, and glad to be an Alamedan from the standpoint that with her in leadership, at least she's trying to move it forward. God forbid if Matarrisi is elected
right.
mayor.
Or Maryland.
Well, now let me ask you this: if Marilyn runs for mayor, she's not up for re-election as council, so she could lose and go right back to her council seat.
Yeah,
okay.
Exactly. So towards that end, what you were just saying, Ralph, I try to talk to every person I know in the cannabis community and state that not only do they need to express themselves at the ballot box for Trish, but to turn out and do some of the work, because Trish championed cannabis in Alameda. And if we want to show that that is a demographic that crosses every other demographic in Alameda, builders, renters, homeowners, traffic haters, traffic lovers, the one thing that crosses the demographic is they all consume or are pro-cannabis. And as such, we need to show up as the cannabis community and help in whatever way we can, big or small, to get this politician that we all like and who championed our issue reelected. Okay. Because, as you say, if it's Matarrisi or Maryland, then it's either more obliviousness or old school thinking. And of course, if either one of those lose a spot, we might get another fire department or police department candidate, which would not do us wonders either as the community or as the cannabis community, in my opinion, as 85% of our budget.
It would be nice to get candidates who aren't controlled by those two unions, either or both. And I can give you a million reasons why. But for one, that trouble in getting off the island that Trish had to address the national press basically yesterday, it's epidemic. It's not going to stop with one pothole being cleaned up, and these unions want to just build beyond belief, and I could understand that, but there's no way to stop the traffic. There are only 5 ways off the island, and that's not going to change.
So this is what's so amazing, and this is why I'm positive in a lot of ways. This was an unforeseen circumstance between two cities, basically, and Caltrans, right?
Right.
So originally it was one lane this weekend and closed all day yesterday for, 10 a.m. to midnight. And it was supposed to go back to one lane all week. But Trish worked with Libby Schaff and our two local mayors and Caltrans. And because the mayors have had an opportunity to spend time with each other and know each other, not just on city business and such, then they had a personal relationship. And this was an example of two mayors and the government agency Caltrans working together. So by midnight last night, the tunnel was fully open and will not be one lane all week because it was a high priority. If this would have been left to the machinations of government, who knows how quickly this would have been done. But when two mayors are working together with Caltrans to solve a problem, these are the kinds of things that we need to move forward. It seems to me that as soon as you have outside interests, be they certain unions, be they developers, be they perhaps city employees with their own agendas, then we wind up with the quagmire that is so many things in Alameda. So I loved what happened with the tunnel yesterday. Quite honestly, it was an unforeseen circumstance that the person we're talking about, our mayor, took it upon herself to not only communicate with the people, but to communicate with the other mayor and Caltrans and work extensively to have an outcome that was what nobody would have even considered at the outset. That was in one day.
In one day. And to put that into perspective, Puerto Rico lost its power like 9 months ago or whatever it was. They haven't gotten it back. The federal government works much like you described the horrible possibilities of how this thing could have drug on for days, weeks, and months. She got it done in one day. That's a leader. A leader isn't somebody who talks. A leader is somebody who does. And both mayors are to be commended, Libby Schaff, the Oakland mayor, and Trish Spencer, who is just terrific on every level. So let's see to it that she gets elected, but for our own purposes of advancing the agenda of legalizing cannabis, all cannabis, not just medical cannabis, in Alameda, a small little city right across the bay from San Francisco. Let's become that prototype that I think we can and lead the way in changing it. I mean, we don't have to go underground to do this. We're not breaking any laws. It can be done. We need to get signatures. And first thing, we need to get it to City Hall and what have you. How close is that?
If possibly, it's looking like I have one additional question for the city clerk, but I will be at City Hall Friday morning, and if my question is answered in the affirmative, then we'll submit the documentation Friday. If I learn something new, then we'll go from there.
Now, is the city required to get back to you in due time, or could they table it? No.
So this is Alameda County and basically Cal State, but basically Alameda County election law. So no, they can't. What they do have is if I'm able to submit the NOI, the notice of intent, on Friday, they have 14 working days, so basically 3 weeks, to what's known as
well, if you're gonna try to determine what a working day in city government is, that's very difficult. I didn't know there were working days.
No, that's Monday to Friday.
Oh,
so 14 days is not 2 weeks; it's Monday to Friday. So that's why it's almost 3 weeks.
Oh, okay.
Because working weeks, but so they would then title it and return it. So everything in the process, to answer your question, once you submit, everything in the process is very well spelled out with time factors and responsibilities on all ends and such. And I would encourage anybody listening at all, anywhere, that if you're interested in either citizen activism or cannabis, then go to Facebook, look up Alameda Cannabis Times, and join us, because we are going to keep moving forward, and the citizens lead the way. Remember, the Constitution starts with we the people.
Okay. Let me stress something else. What's happening is killing the medical marijuana industry locally.
Yep.
People who need treatment for a myriad of different things, they need medical treatment, have been getting it when they were the only branch of cannabis that was legal. Now that the other is legal, shelves are barren of things like edibles, vapes, and what have you. The majority of medical patients don't inhale. They ingest in a varied ways, like I say, vaping, dabbing, this, that, and the other thing, or the lotions and the edibles and what have you. So what all this is doing is hurting the sick when it comes down to it. And if there's no other reason to get this straight and get Proposition 64 going in the right way, is to serve the people that need it, that just aren't going out to get a buzz. They need it for mental or physical problems. And what comes to mind are the veterans. And there's compassionate programs for seniors and veterans on hold right now because of all this craziness. And the other problem is big business versus small business. And I know your time is limited. If you could address this a little bit and clear things up, how big business is infiltrating the industry and making it worse for we the little guy. All we wanted was decriminalization. I knew from the start that legalization was going to cause so much problem. It's decriminalized. Leave us the fuck alone already. That's my thinking. Your thoughts along those lines.
Sure. So let me stay on the glass half full side on both these issues. So first, yes, I am extremely disappointed in the state of California, if for no other reason than they had the opportunity to look at what the other legal states did and what was the effects from their actions on their own medical markets. So I'm extremely disappointed. But as I said, staying on the half full side.
Rich, is there a czar of all of this in California? Is there some?
Lori Ajax. But staying with this for a second, Ralph, the compassionate giving of cannabis to either low income or, people who were dealing with all the money needed to go to their medical issues and, and such. The compassionate giving of cannabis was the casualty of this. However, the state has heard presentations. The state has considered the lack of compassionate programs' existence after January 1st to be a medical emergency. The Cannabis Commission has started to move forward to provide pathways for no tax, no sale, and no license cost for compassion programs. And they even went so far to say anything that's outside their purview of control, for instance, business regulations and other things like that they will make presentations to each of the relevant areas and state that this is a medical emergency. So we're moving forward well on the compassion side, and I look to see compassion programs back. That doesn't fully address the whole medical issue by any means. But
can you give us an ETA? Can you give these people, we people, an ETA on this?
Okay, so let me do two things, because I think your question is for any listeners who have been affected more so than the general legal issue. So, if there's any listeners who've been affected and their compassion programs have been curtailed, there are still active compassion programs out there. I was just heard of one from a dispensary the other day that did an intake, did a medical checkup, came back with multiple syringes of RSO and tracking methods. Very professional, very medical model. So reach out to your community if you're listening and seek them out. They're hard to find, but they still do exist. And I would honestly, Ralph, hope to see, in my personal opinion, the state fully be able to move on this by midsummer. And that is not based on anything I've read, but because of the high priority of this and how quickly it's been moving since it's been originated in less than a month ago, I have high hopes. Now, for your second issue, big business.
That's what I want you to get to, because I'm confused by it all, and it's so easy to confuse me.
So, in a nutshell, when Prop 64 was sold to the public, it was sold with the understanding of a couple of things. One, that this industry was built by cottage people, and we have to welcome them into this industry in order to curtail the black market issues. Two, those small farmers would be protected absolutely for 5 years by simply not allowing a single farm above an acre, nor allowing stacking of licenses. So you couldn't have 5 licenses and therefore cover 5 acres. Now, what happened is that basically survived through all the iterations until the umpteenth hour, or the 99th hour, however that's phrased. And then all of a sudden, the state at the last minute allowed a loophole that allowed basically unlimited income big business to monopolize this licensing. This is why we've seen basically no farmers come into this market, and therefore the state's goal of a black market going away is a pipe dream, to use a reference. But the good news here, again, I said I wanted to stay half full, is the California Growers Alliance, which represents a large amount of farmers in the state and especially in the Emerald Triangle. They've been very active politically in this whole process, and of course they feel like they got screwed, as we all did in this, and so they filed a lawsuit against the state. So that's great news, because now it's in a judge's hands, and I am not a lawyer or a judge, but it's very clear what the people voted for. It's very clear that in every iteration of the temporary regulation existed, and at the last minute it came out, and then we even know what large political action committees made large contributions, and then the law changed. So I don't know, if it walks like a duck and talks like a duck and swims like a duck, there's a pretty good chance it might be a duck, and I would hope the judge who will eventually hear this case would see that as well. And if so, then I would hope that it would be in their ability to dictate to the state that this loophole must go away, and hopefully bringing small farmers in. But to be honest with you, Ralph, this is just one part of a larger problem. We have to understand that in any legal industry, and that's what we are now, large players will come. Right now, the only reason every single large player in the world isn't here is because if they do business in any other state, they can be accused of money laundering if they're involved in cannabis in our state. So,
which brings us to the relationship between the federal government and the state of California.
Exactly.
Is there anything new on that horizon?
Well, more and more as we move towards the midterms and the great orange one, or great in his own mind orange one, sees more and more Republicans trying to run from him in order to save their own jobs in the midterms, what we are also seeing is more and more bipartisan support in Congress to do several things. Right now, there's a lot of push in Congress to allow cannabis banking, which is, we've talked about before.
Right.
There's a push for descheduling from Schedule 1 to 2, which I'm not a fan of. There's a push for descheduling entirely, and then there's a push for legalization nationally.
Now, why do you say you're not a fan of 2? You want it to be entirely, in other words.
Schedule 1 is your basic heroin, your LSDs, right? So
we've got to get it off of that because anabolic steroids are Schedule 3.
But here's the thing. Schedule 1 is, besides the drugs we're familiar with their names, basically states that no medical research can happen because it is acknowledged there is no medical value to these drugs. So first of all, one is a joke with cannabis because the federal government owns a patent on it as medicine. So that's a joke. But the reason I say I don't want it Scheduled 2.
Would you repeat what you said? I didn't quite catch it. It's a joke because the federal government owns
a patent on cannabis as medicine. Were you not aware of that?
No.
I'll send you the patent.
Okay. I certainly believe you. That's not. I just didn't
I'll
hear
send you the patent later, but it's very interesting, right? Because one hand doesn't know what the other hand is doing. But the reason about Schedule 2, Ralph, is think of things like cocaine. So cocaine has always had medical value. It's used in operations. It's used in various ways as a painkiller, in fact. It's also used on the street, as we know, both to sniff it and to smoke it.
Right.
So, Schedule 2 drugs allow research, but also come with extraordinarily harsh penalties and everything. And let's be clear. I have only seen cannabis being sold by large global organizations to make money as opposed to amongst friends, right?
Right.
And the only reason they can do that is because there's a large desire in the community for cannabis, and the government makes it illegal. One of the main points of legalization was getting rid of these cartels in cannabis. Because if it's legal, they have no interest. There's not enough profit in it if it's legal. So what's happening is I would personally like to see cannabis be what it is. I would like to see it be nationally recognized as legal. I personally don't think it's in the same category as cigarettes and alcohol, but clearly that's what most people think. I'd like to see it nationally legal. I'd like to see California and the United States take their rightful place in the world as grower of the greatest product in the world. And I'd like to see all the ancillary privileges be given to the cannabis industry as are given to every industry. And that also means getting rid of IRS 280E.
Okay. I would say that lumping cannabis in with alcohol and cigarettes is more harmful to the cause than anything. And if specifically we can get it unlumped in with those two deadly substances, both and in conjunction with each other, are killers. Cannabis is a healer, and just the confusion itself to the mass majority is understated, and it's how it hurts our cause.
I agree, and the way I approach this, Ralph, if I'm in a conversation where the pro argument is what I call the syntax argument. This is a personal choice, just like alcohol and cigarettes, so we're not going to do anything but protect people and make some money, right? But what I say, this is great. In order to emphasize your point when I'm in those conversations, I say, I don't believe it should be, like you said, groups of those two. It's never killed anybody. But most importantly, you find me one doctor in the United States who says that alcohol and or tobacco can be used as medicine for health, then I understand my argument. But that's my point. It may be a recreation. People smoke this recreationally for enjoyment. However, the other two things, they're also getting health benefits. There's nobody ever going to say tobacco or alcohol is anything but personal recreational consumption. That's why I agree with you. This needs to be legalized and not grouped with the sin tax, things like that.
Well, there's a fine line between recreational enjoyment and medical help. And I contend that as a long-term smoker, and I tell this to people all the time, it's not a matter of getting high anymore. It's just simply a matter of ingesting medication that can make it easier to communicate with the folks who are adamantly opposed to the things that we've talked about. We have to meet these people on the street. We have to communicate with these people. We have to tolerate these people. Naturally, we need a joint. give us a frickin' break. So, believe me, recreational, it crosses over every day to medical. And people take it recreation, they have no idea. They don't even think of it in terms of how it's soothing the savage beast, if nothing else, for a lot of folks. And you would think the federal government, to keep us all content and working and what have you, that they would be piping it in to the school, into the vents, to everybody, and keep us all happy. And what would be wrong with that? What would be wrong with that? And here's the basic bottom line to it all. The powers that be in the federal government are so indebted to Big Farm that changing that will have to change the system of these elected officials cannot enrich themselves. They cannot get money from lobbyists. They have to be neutral in making their decisions. And until the system changes in that way, most of us are going to have to stay scofflaw. That's pretty much the bottom line of it. I'd
encourage everyone to grow their own. There's these
legally,
now.
Of course, legally you can grow up to 6 plants. They haven't stopped that. They haven't said.
And there's these things now that basically are the size of a typical refrigerator that are all in one iPhone type controlled growing environment.
It's a tent. You buy a tent. And it's
not even a tent. It's actually like a refrigerator box now. There's lots of companies doing this.
Really?
And they'll take it through your whole cycle. So it's not like you have to, have plants in your house all over the place, or you have to worry about bugs and everything. You're in a totally self-contained environment for nutrients and water and light and protection because, it's not like somebody could walk in the room and just see plants. So,
and if they did, it's legal to walk and to have those plants.
Well, I was more thinking about in your family, not from the legality plan.
That's true.
So that's what I say. Everyone can deal with this big business issue that we're talking about by taking the power away from business, because if there's not a great profit in it, they're not in it.
Okay. Rich, can I lighten it up for a second? You mentioned
Sure.
family, and I, as you may or may not know, was a stay-at-home dad, my son, and heavy-duty user over the years. So people said to me, well, what's going to happen? What if your son comes to you? What are you going to answer your son about marijuana? And one day, sure shooting, kid comes home. I said, where'd you get that bag? He says, I bought it at school. I was faced with that dilemma. I went, whoa, in my head. So what I did, I marched the kid and the bag to the principal's office of the school. And I said, look what my kid bought at your school. This stuff has seeds. It has stems. My kid wants his money back. And that principal had to pull out a 50 and just give the money back. And that's the way it was. So that's my story. I'm sticking with it. You got to look after your kid. You can't have them buying bad crap off the streets. And be good. Rich, you're appalled by that. You're amazed. That's just a joke. I just wanted to say.
I'm just laughing here, Ralph. I know it's a joke.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, we have Rich Moskowitz on a regular basis to keep us updated on this struggle to go forward. You wouldn't think in 2018, after a mandate to legalize it, that we'd be going through this. Does it, looking back to how you thought on Election Day, does this almost amaze you that we're still in this quagmire, this clusterfuck of problems?
No, it doesn't. I've been a person who's never had much faith in government. So it's funny, though, because I also, a year and a half ago, having that point of view, never would have thought I would have participated in the process. And over the last year and a half, with the people I've met and the incredible change that all these people have been able to bring to their local communities, and seeing even the change in Alameda, yes, granted, we're doing a bit of the tortoise hair thing, and we're the tortoise, but just like that fable taught us, maybe that's okay. So I think that the state is aware that they stumbled. And we're still under emergency regulations. As I said earlier, I was disappointed in a lot of things that the state has done, but it is by no stretch of the imagination a done deal. And as far as Alameda goes, well, the fable says the tortoise wins the race. So let's hope that survives for eons for a reason. There's no reason whatsoever that Alameda is in the position we're in, and with the way that people feel. However, at the state level, I really hope they get that act together, and this doesn't prove to be a failed experiment in favor of business. Local level, I think that people showing up at the city council meeting and speaking makes all the difference as we move forward.
Locally, Alameda, California, can you buy medicinal marijuana on the island? Cannabis. We don't call it marijuana anymore.
As of today, March 20th, 2018, no, you cannot.
You cannot.
As in April, in the beginning of April, I should just give you this update, Ralph. 2 weeks ago, the city council heard from the city staff about the RFP process for submitting applications for cannabis businesses. It was going to be a terrible process, in my opinion. I spoke to the council, expressed my point of view that a 3-person commission led by the chief of police, along with 130-point process with no rubrics, was not a good way to move forward. Luckily, the council heard me. They redirected the city to come up with a 5-person panel, not involving the police. And the new proposal by city staff will be heard in April by the council. Assuming the council approves that, then the process is open, and then that could take, a month or two, however long the process takes. and then licenses will be issued after the RFP process. So I am hoping by the election that we have licenses given out. But if licenses are given out in, let's say, August, then it's still going to take a business 30 to 90 days to build out their location. So I don't know if a medical patient will even be able to purchase medical cannabis in Alameda before the end of the year. However, the right should be given out before then.
Okay, that seems very tortoisite. I want a little more hair.
Right, but we did not want a 3-person triumvirate led by the police chief, the now put on hold city manager, who's put on paid leave, and one person from community development. It's much better that we get an open, fair process that doesn't involve the chief of police, because both communities have a stigma attached. Cannabis community has a stigma attached from the police, and the police have a stigma attached from the cannabis community.
Hey, the police have more of we in the cannabis community look at the police with stigma just as well, because
exactly.
Over the years, we as consumers have been treated very, very unfairly.
And you and I are speaking that as privileged white people. So think of all the other people of color and other communities of color who are treated not only if we're treated unfairly in this community, imagine everyone else. And it's obvious.
And you and I, as two Jews, are fair from the privileged white community on a number of different levels as well. But I see your point. Just imagine what other folks have to go through wearing their ethnicity on their sleeve on a daily basis in relationship to a police problem that is nationwide epidemic. They're shooting our kids in the back oftentimes. And you don't have to go far. This isn't the South, but there have been many instances. You could just look at the BART police as an example. It's criminal. And that all this money, all this time has been wasted when the people have already made the decision that it's okay and all it is an herb. Again, leave us alone. Let us live life. And when I say I don't like it when it's tortoisey or whatever, I'm serious. You got old people. 6 months to an old person is like 5 years to a younger person. And why should people in the last months of their lives, and we all are on some level, be asked to just purely suffer for no reason? It's criminal. Get these people out of elected office. That's what we need to do, and we need to put it on the ballot. And Rich, I'm glad that you're doing this. I'm glad that you took a political stance when you could have, like the rest of us, speaking for myself, have done, and that meant not all we could have done. You're doing all you can do, and that's appreciated by the cannabis community and by just fellow human being. Thanks, Rich.
Thank you, Ralph. I have nothing to say to that except that
I am appreciative. I'm appreciative of your communique on this show. It's all archived on YouTube, and someday people are going to look back upon this, and they're going to get information. As other states legalize, they're going to get information that's going to help them based on what we're going through, and maybe find ways of avoiding the pitfalls that has made transition so difficult. It shouldn't be this difficult. That's all.
Absolutely. And Yeah, it could be a new dawn in America and such. And I guess in my mind, in the background, we're similar age, is the last song from Poseidon Adventure from our youth, Maureen McCormick. There's got to be a morning after to help us get it through the night.
I'll tell you something.
Because that's what we're in.
I got a call going on with a record producer right now. They want to sign you to a label.
I doubt that.
That is so melodic. You inspired me to act on your behalf. Would you give us? Would you give us one more verse of that, and that should take us out.
Well, I don't want to kill your listenership, so I think I'm going to have to pass.
Okay. Thank you, Rich. It's a pleasure chatting with you, and it always is.
Thanks, Ralph.
All right. If you're listening out there, it's Canna Chat in the Zone, Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. If you enjoy this offering, any offering on our network, please be kind enough to box up some lightly used children's books and take them to the Head Start program wherever you live. Kids need to read, they need to become school ready, they need to develop an imagination, and they need to get their noses out of the devices. You don't see kids anymore with a book in his or her hands as much as should be. So do that for me. It would be great. If you didn't enjoy this or any of our offerings, I'm not saying that you can go down to the Head Start program and steal some of their books and bring it back. No, it doesn't work that way. Have a great day. We'll be back when we do. Adios, everybody.